Chat, you know what I did today? Today I woke up and I decided, oh yeah, we're gonna use the leaks no jutsu, which is a secret technique that doubles your concurrent viewers. It's a broken strat, actually. Just like for the Ayato pre-release analysis, we're not really gonna focus on her power level too much. Instead, we're mostly gonna focus on how her kit functions, the kind of teams where you'll be able to get value out of her kit, how you wanna build her, things like that, right? We're basically just going through this and figuring shit out. She's a Hydro unit, which is a good thing. It's the element where it's the easiest for a character to be good. There's no such thing as a bad Hydro character. The Hydro character that's arguably the worst, which is generally Barbara, is still pretty solid and really useful if you don't have some of the other Hydro alternatives. It's very difficult to make a Hydro character that's actually useless. The main reason for that being that so many teams want Hydro. Taser teams want Hydro. Freeze teams want Hydro. Vape teams want Hydro. The only teams that don't really want Hydro are like Shao teams, but you don't hate Hydro there. Ito teams, I guess. Meld Ganyu or other reverse melt teams. But most of the good teams like really do want Hydro. A unit being Hydro is it's a good thing in terms of like what you can expect from their kit. Let's go through her talents first. Her normal attack multipliers, not really high enough to justify going for a physical build unless the rest of her kit scales with physical, which it doesn't. And so don't play physical Yelan. Right, like that's the first thing. Now the second thing is she has a special charge attack, which happens when spending 5 seconds out of combat, which it basically incentivizes her to not be on field. So even more reason not to play physical. Although it's hard to say how good this actually is, like how fast you can actually get it out. It's not like Ganyu's C6 where it comes out instantly. You're gonna have to wait for the thing to be ready, but that also means that if you do it a little bit too early, you're not gonna get it, which means in order to be safe, you're probably gonna try to do it a little bit late. It's not gonna be 80% decreased charge time because unless you're doing it frame perfect, probably gonna be more like 70-75%. We'll probably see when she's out if it actually is worth it. I think that her normal attack talents is gonna be mostly irrelevant. So let's move on to the parts of her kit that I think are actually relevant. Her E, basically, it makes you move fast. And then if you go through enemies at the end of the duration, all the enemies you move through will take damage. And you can either tap or hold it. I would assume like hold is basically just you get to move more. Each opponent marked by the lifeline when it explodes grant a 34% chance to reset her breakthrough state. That's the charge attack thing. I also don't think that's going to be useful. Actually might be, because after your E, you generally want to catch the particles on her. So if you do Q first and then E, then you're gonna have to stay on her to catch the particles. If you're gonna stay on her anyways, you might as well do a charge attack, right? But I don't know how relevant this actually will be. I don't expect it to be too relevant. Now, the things that are actually important about this is this generates 4 particles as far as we've been told. It's really high for a 10-second cooldown. If you look at the elemental skill production rate, most characters are around the 20. There's characters that are over it, there's characters that are under it, but most characters are at around 20 particles per minute, or 1 particle per 3 seconds. This is 4 particles per 10 seconds, which puts her like relatively high. But there can be issues with that as well. Her burst deals AoE damage and creates an exquisite throw which aids her in battle. An exquisite throw is basically very similar to Xingqiu's burst. It does a coordinated attack when you attack, and it hits 3 times per coordinated attack. What that means is that, much like Xingqiu, she can be used to apply Hydro off field. And because of that, it's very possible that you'll use her in teams where you want to spend more than 10 seconds off of Yelan onto your Hu Tao, onto your whatever, right? And if that's the case, then this 10-second cooldown won't actually be 10 seconds. You'll use it like after 15 seconds. And then the only way to get 2 per rotation is going to be to make your rotation 25 seconds, which is probably not going to be worth it. But the problem with if you end up doing only 1 E per rotation is that, boy, you're gonna need a lot of energy recharge. I did a few calcs on her energy requirements. If you only get 1 E with Favonius, you still need 260 energy recharge. That's with Favonius. Without Favonius, it's around 340. This is with about 10 particles from this of the team. It's possible you get more. You can get like maybe 18 in a team that generates a lot of energy, but that's still 270 without Fav, right? Or around 220 with Fav. Basically, it's rough. So most of the time you're gonna try to get 2 E's per rotation. There's obviously gonna be like other ways to get around that. You can use a Fav weapon to make it go down. You can use a Sac weapon to make it go down. You can use 2 Hydro to make it go down. You don't really want to have a dedicated battery for her, that only just regenerates energy. But like also getting a battery, like getting 2 hydro units, if the other hydro unit is good, can still be worth it. I think a lot of people underestimate running 2 hydro units together because they think about the hydro resonance, which you get when you have 2 hydro units, and they're like, well, that's completely terrible. I don't want this. Which, you know what? Good fucking point. However, if the hydro characters are good enough that running them together would get you more than a resonance would, then it doesn't really matter. Anyways, let's look at the rest of her talents. So when the party has a 1, 2, 3, 4 elemental types, Yelan's max HP is increased by 6, 12, 18, 30%. So you're never gonna go only 1 elemental type. So it's always at least 12. And then you can get basically 6% from running 3 elemental types and another 12% from running 4. If we actually look at like in practice how much that is, from 2 to 3, it's 3%. From 2 to 4, it's 9%. It's a relevant buff, but 10% more DPS isn't really enough to justify running a team with 4 different elements just for that. I mean, it's nice, but it's not enough to build your team around it. Gain 25% more rewards when oh my. Okay, this is actually probably the best expedition passive we have. Like, let's be real, nobody, like literally no one goes onto their expeditions, runs a 20-hour expedition, and then comes back exactly 15 hours later for the Bennett passive to actually be useful. Like, literally no one does that. So more rewards is better than lower time. It could be good clickbait. Yelan power creeps Bennett. True. True. So just like Ayato was Hu Tao power creep, Yelan is Bennett power creep. Finally, so long as an exquisite throw is in play, so exquisite throw is her burst, your own active character deals 1% more damage. This increases by a further 3.5% damage every second. The maximum increase to damage dealt is 50%. At second 0, you get 1%. At second 1, plus 3.5%. And it keeps going up and 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 up. So if you stay on field 14 seconds, which is enough to get the max, your average damage percent is gonna be around 26%. Does it reset after switching characters? It should, right? Does it not? It only resets when the burst expires. I see. Most of the time, what your rotations are gonna look like is you cast Yelan's E, then you swap your active character, your carry, whatever. Most carries have uptime windows that last between like 7 and 10 seconds. Let's go for 10 seconds. Then you have another 4 seconds where this passive can stack up, but realistically, that's probably not gonna be all that relevant. And if you do stay on field for 10 seconds, then that's an average buff to your carry of about 19% damage percent. Because this is probably not going to show up on the character's stats, it's likely going to work like Raiden's E, which would mean that it doesn't snapshot. So effectively, right? Effectively, you're going to get about a 20% damage bonus on average. In certain teams that have a bunch of buffs to cast, like for example in a Hu Tao team, even though your E lasts for like about 10 seconds on Hu Tao with hit lag, your other buffs are going to expire before that. Like at the start, right, you get that 1%, it doesn't really make a difference. At the end, you get 50%, or probably just gonna be like 35%, which makes a pretty big difference. But the reality is that you're not actually gaining that 70 damage because by the time you get to that 35%, your other buffs have expired, right? You lose the Kazuha buff, this goes back to 10, this goes back to 150. And the actual damage gain, instead of being about 70, is about 50, right? Because of those things, basically what ends up happening is you're not actually getting that 20-ish% average. Realistically, more getting a little bit lower than that. Because when your other buffs are active, your Yelan buff is low, and by the time your Yelan buff gets high, the other buffs expire. And so in a lot of characters, it's not actually going to be that 20-ish% average. It's going to be a little bit less. With that said, I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick, and I'll be right back. Weapons! So, I made a calc looking at weapons. Obviously, there's a few assumptions in there. We're assuming about 220% ER. Because of the assumptions we're using, ER weapons get, like, favored quite heavily. But I also don't think that... I also think that in a lot of situations, those assumptions are going to be accurate. There's going to be situations where Favor isn't quite as high, but in most situations, it will be. But yeah, realistically, Yelan's best weapon is her signature weapon, and other than that, it's Favonius or Elegy. Elegy is like about 10% behind in terms of personal damage output, but it also has the buff, which is generally going to make the team damage output higher. The new free-to-play weapon is... It's quite a bit behind. It's not good on Yelan. Unless they change the stats, obviously they could, right? So, looking at her weapons, we're gonna have Aqua, good. We're gonna have Favonius, good. We're gonna have Elegy, good. And unlike for Ayato, the good weapon is free to play. Favonius Warbow is available for free by doing the story, which means this is a free to play weapon, which means the rest of the weapons don't really matter. If by some very unfortunate accident and use your Favonius Warbow as fodder, you can go for either recurve bow or slingshot as options that are about 12% behind, as you can see, right? Like the difference between recurve bow and slingshot, even though they're really like far in terms of like the weapons that are in between them, the difference is less than 1%. Some of you might be wondering why Favonius is so good, and it's more than just the energy recharge. So let's go over that a little bit. As you guys can see from her skillings, right? All of her damage sources, max HP, and her E, max HP. All of her relevant damage scales with HP. What that means is base attack is completely and utterly useless on her. Now, the way that weapons are balanced in this game, you have your base attack and you have your substat, and the higher your base attack is, the lower your substat is. For 4-star weapons, you'll have weapons that start at 41, 42, 44, and I think 46 for like Ali Flash and Wavebreaker's Fin. I don't know if it's 46 or 45. And they're gonna reach at level 90, 454, 510, 565, and 620. Generally, when you look at substats, so that's base attack, when you look at the substats, depending on what the base attack is, the amount of substat you're gonna get is gonna be different. So for example, for an attack percent weapon, attack percent weapons for 4 stars, Ali Hunter starts at 44, goes to 565, is 27.6. Rust starts at 42, so 41.3 at when you have 510. We have a 454 type as a catalyst, the Eye of Perception. Eye of Perception 454, 55.1% attack. And then finally, the Wavebreaker's Fin is a pole arm that has 620 base, and it has 13.8% attack. What that means is the higher the base attack is, the less of a substat you have. Now, because Yelan does not give a shit about attack at all, what she wants is a weapon that does not have an attack percent substat, because that would be useless, and that has as low base attack as possible. Because the lower the base attack is, the higher the substat will be. And because her base attack is useless and the substats can be useful, you want to have a lot of substat. So for 4-star bows, let's take a look at the ones that have 454 base attack. Hamayumi 454, but useless substat. That's not good. You don't want attack percent because you don't scale with attack. Favonius Warbow 454, use full substat because she needs a lot of ER. Compound Bow 454, but useless substat, right? So that's it for the 4-star weapons. The only 4-star weapon that has a like quote-unquote optimal stat distribution for Yelan is the Favonius Warbow. Now, like even though that's the case, like that doesn't mean that the other weapons are necessarily bad. Like, you'll still have, for example, Sack Bow being a pretty good option because even though it has high base attack, it has a useful effect and a useful passive. But what makes Favonius so good is that not only is the stat distribution good, right? You get 61% energy recharge, which is more than a sentence. It's like over 10 substats worth of energy recharge. But on top of that, even if you only get 1 proc per rotation on this, that's 3 clear particles, which is 6 energy. Now, realistically, even if you run lower ER because of this energy recharge, you're still gonna run like at least like 150, probably more. In the calculations that I used 180% ER. And so 6 energy at 180% ER is almost 11 energy, 10.8 energy. Let's just say 10. But yeah, 10 energy is a pretty fucking massive amount just from the passive. And if you have a high refined Favonius Warbow and you can get 2 procs per rotation, and that like 10-ish energy becomes 20-ish energy. But the conclusion from those things is that Favonius Warbow is basically the perfect 4-star bow for Yelan. The passive is really good, and the stat distribution is really good. So good, in fact, that it's going to be better than most of the 5-star options. The only 5-star option that is going to be better is going to be the Aqua Simulacra, because if we look at the Aqua Simulacra, it starts at 44 base attack, goes all the way up to 542. Now, for a 4-star weapon, that would be high, but for a 5-star weapon, that's actually the lowest they can go. The only 5-star weapon that we have right now that has 44 base at level 1, I think Redhorn is as well, but we have Redhorn and Jade Cutter. They're stats that give a massive amount of the substat in exchange for not giving as much base attack. But like we discussed earlier, lower base attack on Yelan is not a downside because none of her relevant damage scales with attack, and higher substat when it's crit is a pretty big upside. But then on top of that, the Aqua Simulacra also gives you 16% HP, which is the stat she wants, and 20% damage percent, which is a stat that everyone wants. But even then, it's only about a 16% increase from the Favonius Warbow. And that's without taking into account the fact that Favonius Warbow is generating energy, which is generating clear particles, which means that the rest of your team, if you're running a Favonius Warbow, can run a little bit less ER because they're gaining more energy from those clear particles. In practice, like the actual difference between Aqua Simulacra and Favonius Warbow when taking into account the damage gain on other units by needing less ER is probably going to be closer to 10%. Most 5-star weapons are anywhere between 20 and 30% when it comes to signature weapons on characters. And so I would say that if you're planning on going for Yelan and you just really like her, this is probably not the best unit to go for their 5-star weapon. That being said, the Aqua Simulacra's stat line is so good that even outside of Yelan, it's still going to be very good. Is it possible Elegy will be better in terms of overall team DPS? Yeah, so Elegy will likely also give you higher team DPS because you're losing about 10% DPS from going from Favonius to Elegy, but you're gaining the Elegy buff, which is 100 EM and 20% attack on your carry, right? Which is generally going to be like definitely worth it. If you have Aqua or Elegy, you can go for those, but otherwise Favonius is going to be better than all of the other options. If you fed your Favonius, you can get away with using Sack Bow. It's also a fine option, or either Recurve Bow or Slingshot. I personally wouldn't recommend any of the other weapons. Let's look at her artifacts. I think that the first important thing to note about Yelan is that because she scales with HP only, and because there's not a lot of relevant HP buffs, like characters that buff HP, then you actually get a slightly higher value out of HP percent substats and main stats. Now, in situations where you don't run Favonius, and so in situations where you're running Aqua or Elegy, and you need a lot of ER, you need to get that 220-ish ER, then ER Sands is gonna be a valid option. And if you're going ER Sands, then that means you're not getting HP percent main stat anywhere, which means your HP rolls are actually incredibly valuable. If you look at the amount of HP that Yelan will get, so her base stats, 14 for 50. HP percent, she gains generally, I would expect this to be at either 12 or 18. Let's do 18. You're gonna get, I don't know, like 20% from substats maybe as a baseline. Flat HP, 4780 from the flower, plus maybe 400-ish from about 2 rolls of flat HP, for a total of about 25k HP. Your crit value on a normal artifact set will be around 120 from substats, plus whatever she starts with. That's 24.2 times 2 plus 50, so that's 98.4. So this is without a circlet and with an ER sense. This is gonna be crit, and this is gonna be HP percent circlet. So with a grid circlet, so the way that you normally do it, this is where your crit value would end up being. With an HP percent circlet, you gain this. Now, if we look at the effective HP, or what's gonna get put into the damage calculation, total HP multiplied by crit multiplier, and it's actually higher with an HP percent circlet than it is with a crit circlet. Not by a particularly significant margin, but it is. Now, obviously, it's possible you're gonna have more substats. It's possible maybe you're running Aqua Simulacra, which gives you another 16% baseline. Actually, with Aqua Simulacra, you're also getting 88 point... how much? But even then, right? Very close. Realistically, you're running one of 3 weapons. You're running Aqua Simulacra, you're running Elegy, or you're running Favonius. If you're running Elegy, and you have no ER substats whatsoever, you can run an ER Sands and not waste stats too much. But if you have a few ER substats, then ER Sands is kind of eh, but it can still be fine. If you're running Aqua Simulacra, you're basically gonna have to get an ER Sands. And if you're running ER Sands, which means you're not getting HP percent Sands, then you're not reaching diminishing returns as harsh on your HP percent, which means that the HP, that for your circlet, an HP circlet is about as good as a crit circlet. If you are gonna get that HP percent Sands, right, as you can see, then the crit starts out scaling by a pretty decent amount, right? This is like 3-4%. But even then, that's only like 2-ish substats. So what I want you to take away from this is HP circlets are very good on Yelan. HP substats are very good on Yelan. So don't focus too much on crit. Keep in mind that HP percent is also incredibly good on her. With that out of the way, let's look at the artifact sets that she can use. She scales with HP and Hydro damage, so you can obviously go for 2-piece. So 2-piece TOM, or Tenacity, 2-piece Heart of Depth. She's gonna be fine, but realistically, it's not what you want. Technically, you can also go 4-piece Tenacity, but that's definitely not what you want. The general 2 possible sets that you're gonna wanna go for are gonna be either 4-piece Emblem, which is gonna be the set that's gonna give her the highest personal damage. 4-piece Emblem is gonna be significantly better than this, because not only are you getting more damage percent than with these, because she needs so much ER, but also because she needs so much ER, like that 20% ER from the 2-piece is really useful. Use Emblem. If you're gonna go for her personal damage, we're not even gonna say fine, we're gonna say eh. Even though Emblem will always be the highest personal damage, that doesn't mean it's the only possible set. There's 3 other sets that can be useful for team damage. We're not talking about Tenacity, because I don't think her uptime will ever really be good enough. So the 3 options that we could consider here are 4-piece Exile, 4-piece Instructor, and 4-piece Noblesse. Now, the biggest problem that I have with the first 2, so 4-piece Exile and 4-piece Instructor, is that Yelan's personal damage output is actually not bad. If we look at the overall damage she does with, this is high investment, but realistic high investment. This is 18k before resistances, so it's about like 9k. So it's about 5k per like sword or whatever you call it, which is about 15k per coordinated attack with Emblem. That's a good amount, right? That's similar to what you'd get out of a high investment Xingqiu. High investment Yelan damage output should be very similar to high investment Xingqiu damage output. That makes the idea of going for a 4-star set, so Instructor or Exile, a lot less appealing, because a 4-star sets, there's a lot to them. There's a lot of things that you lose from going 4-star set. So not only do you lose main stat, but you actually lose a significant amount and a significant quality on your substats. When you look at, for example, the HP percent roll, each roll, instead of being about 5 average, is going to be about 4 average. But it doesn't stop there. If we look at our artifacts, as you can see, +0 5-star artifacts start with either 4 or 3 substats. 4-star artifacts start with either 3 or 2 substats. So you get 1 less substat at the beginning. But then on top of that, the maximum level for 4-star artifacts is level 16. So you're getting 1 less substat roll from leveling them up. So that's 1 less substat at the beginning and 1 less substat at the end. So that's 2 less substats that you get, on top of your substats being a lower number and your main stats being a lower number. All of these things considered, your actual damage output will be severely nerfed from going 4-star set, even if your stats are good. And that's gonna make it so that most of the time, it's just not gonna be worth it. Unless, for example, you're using Yelan with like a whaled out other unit, where you have Constellations and 5-star weapons on them, where like Yelan wouldn't be that big of a portion of the team's damage anyways. But most of the time, that's not really gonna be the case, and you're gonna want to stick with 5-star sets. And so that leaves us with a 4-piece Noblesse. Doesn't have that downside from being a 4-star set, but it does have the downside of not giving as much damage as Emblem. Now, the damage difference is obviously going to be pretty relevant. A little bit over 20% damage. About 20% damage. But in exchange, you're gaining 20% attack for the rest of your team, and it's possible that in some situations it will be worth it. If you look at the team database, this is from a team DPS calc on Raiden National, and as you can see, Xingqiu is about a quarter of the team's DPS. So losing 20% of that 22 is basically 4 to 5% less DPS, but that 20% attack is possibly going to make up for it by buffing your Raiden and your Shengling. That's only the case if you don't have another Noblesse user on your team though. And unlike characters like Xingqiu, because she doesn't scale with attack, Noblesse is an even bigger damage loss on her. So 4-piece Noblesse is going to be good for team DPS. Also, there's obviously going to be the possibility of running 4-piece Blizzard Strayer. I'm actually not sure if it's actually a good idea, even in freeze teams. We can calc it out. 11.9 instead of 12.2. So even then, not really worth going for 4 Blizzard, even in free Steam. Now, the reason for that is basically all of her damage comes from her burst, and she runs really high ER. Like, she has really high energy recharge requirements, which means that the emblem is just very, very valuable. Here's a rundown of her constellation and constellations and how worth they are. Not worth, not worth, not worth, not worth, not worth, not worth. No, but C1 is fine. It helps get 2Es per rotation more easily because you don't have to swap back to her every 10 seconds. You can swap back to her every 20 seconds and use 2Es, which obviously is going to help with the consistency. C2 gives her a little bit more damage, so 12% of her max HP, coupled with better hydro application. C3 is not very good because a significant portion of her damage is coming from her burst. That got changed. C3 is burst. Oh, C3 is burst now. Oh, well, fuck. Okay, well, I guess C3 is fine then. Increase all party members max HP by 10% for 25 seconds for every opponent marked by a lifeline. When the lifeline explodes, a maximum increase of 40% max HP can be attained in this manner. So, it's about a 20% DPS increase if you hit all 4. Realistically, you're not hitting 4, right? The amount of times where you're going to hit 4 opponents with this is going to be probably relatively low. It's going to be between 5 and 20%, right? About 5% per proc. Realistically, it's probably going to be closer to 10 on average. C5 apparently got switched with C3, so it would be the skill, which isn't that good. And then her burst is pretty good. It basically makes her a carry instead of a support. It basically makes it so that your normal attacks now get your charge attack bonus damage. And last 20 seconds will be cleared after Yelan fires 6 arrows. Oh, wait, never mind. So I guess it doesn't last that long, right? Because you only get 6 arrows? Yeah, that's only 1 normal attack string, right? That's not actually that good. Sounds like it's gonna be, like, fun for whales and shit, but honestly not that great. Closing thoughts on Constellation. C1 is quality of life, really similar to Shao C1, right? It's okay, but I wouldn't recommend it. C2, pretty good, but at the end of the day, Yelan's never really gonna be the highest portion of your team DPS, so going for Constellations on her is generally not gonna be as valuable as going in Constellation for your other units. We'll talk about how this can affect her hydro application later. And then C3, a little bit like the C2, except without the hydro application, so it's even worse. C4, fine if you're a Hu Tao whale, I guess, but otherwise, Overall, pretty Constellations. Apart from C6, C2 is the best? Yep. It's definitely not a constellation that's like right in C2 or Aika C2, 3, 4. Like it's okay. It's not something I would recommend to dolphins or I mean maybe some dolphins that want to use her in specific teams, but definitely not for Welkin players or free-to-play players. Like definitely not.